Welcome to our panel discussion on the future of the college classroom for civic engagement, given the presence of dual enrolled and high school students in college courses. I'm joined today by two panelists with experience teaching and working with high school students and courses that involve high school students in a variety of settings. On this panel today, we have Ryan Kostanecki, instructor of political science at Macomb Community College, and Kim Sachs, Assistant Professor of Political Science and MPA Program Director at the University of Michigan Flint. I'm William Obrochta, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas Lutheran University and Director of Professional Development for the APSA Civic Engagement section. Today's panel is meant to focus on experiences with dual enrollment courses and teaching high school students and how those experiences can relate to the work that we do in civic engagement. And so we'll be focusing today mostly on our panelists' experiences with teaching those students and some suggestions about how that process has gone and how they've integrated civic engagement into their work. And so I thought I'd start today by just asking y'all to begin by doing a little description of what your experience teaching high school students for college credit is. And I'll kind of invite maybe Ryan to give us the first response, and then we'll kind of go back and forth from there.
Hello, everyone. I, I have a lot of experience teaching high school students in various formats. This is a new position that I'm in. I've been here for a couple of years at Macomb Community College. And when I started here, I was really surprised, actually. I had a number of high school students in my class, and I'm like, where are you coming from? Like, I didn't actually know originally that I was going to have so many high school students in my class. And we kind of have a mix at Macomb. So we have a dual enrollment, which is kind of it's like an ad hoc a la carte if there's students taking high school classes and they're at a certain level in their high school where they can then also go take college classes because of how well they're doing in their classes. They can just work with a counselor at their institution, and then we have counselors at our institution, and they can come up with a plan to take classes at Macomb. So they're just kind of one-offs. They pay for them, and they come as fit as they see fit for their curriculum planning. And then we have an early college Macomb program, which is much more substantive, where this is a program where students in their sophomore year of high school apply for it. In their junior year, they are accepted. Their junior and senior year of high school, they split their time, half of the time at their home high school institution, half the time at Macomb Community College, and then they stay for what is called a 13th year, and they spend their entire year at Macomb, and they leave with an associate's completely paid for everything. It's a great program. They get all tuition, they get a laptop, all their books, everything is covered by the Macomb Intermediate School District is what it's called. It's kind of an intermediary between like the high schools, the state institutions, and then some of the other institutions in the county, some of the international programs that we have in the county, and also Macomb Community College. So that's where my students come from. Kim, do you want to talk about the students how you see high school students in your classes?
Sure. Hi everyone. When I was hired into U of M Flint, I was a lecturer before I was an assistant professor. One of the reasons I was hired was to actually teach in a dual enrollment program off-site, which it was a track that taught a variety of classes. At that point, the track was geared around students' potential interest in pre-law and criminal justice, though it changed over the years. And I have taught in that type of program where they're in a track of set classes. I have taught dual enrollment students who are, like Ryan said, kind of one-off coming into the classroom, and we get those a lot. And we also have an early college, the Genesee Early College, which actually is on our campus physically. And so we get those students as well. So I would say in my intro classes, we get a good, sometimes a third of the students are early college dual enrollment, some, mixture of that. And then there are some classes that are reserved for those dual enrollment programs specifically. And I have taught in those as well.
So, I mean, we have a range of different models, and this is one of the motivations for the panel is that working with high school students looks different across the country and even looks different in the same institutions as y'all have described. And so I wondered if you could, Ryan, start by talking a little bit about how you think about civic engagement work in the different models that you presented. You know, the one-off student, does that mean anything different for you and how you incorporate civic engagement into the classroom versus the more intentional early college program with a large proportion of students? And then if there are any differences not only between those models with working with high school students, but in classes that don't have high school students in them, does civic engagement work look different in those cases? Or is it all just kind of the same thing and we're maybe needing to just broaden our scope and think about high school students as just another student in a classroom to some extent?
Yeah, I'd say really from my experience, again, doing this only for a few years, I came thinking the former. I am very much now in the latter, where I think that I just treat them as a normal college student. They want to be that. They're there because they want to be in a college environment. These are students that usually are very self-motivated. They're involved in a number of extracurricular activities outside of just being a college student, being a high school student. So they're excited about civic engagement whenever I give them the opportunity to do things. And in the last few semesters, what I've gravitated towards is being very intentional about it and creating assignments that allow them to be more civically engaged with working with outside institutions that we can get kind of more into as we go along the chat here today. But I find that my high school students, they want to be involved, that they're early college and dual enrollment students because they want to go the extra mile. They want to do something interesting. They don't want to just be sitting in their high school. So and so yeah, I find that I haven't had to change things much at all. Usually this a lot of times those students come in too, they've taken AP courses. Some of them have already taken AP government, so they come better prepared to my classroom than some of my traditional 2-year community college students in some ways. So content wise, sometimes they're a little bit ahead, and that gives them the opportunity then maybe to participate in a civic engagement activity or something like that. And they have more latitude to do that because they maybe are more comfortable with the curriculum that we're doing in the classroom.
Kim, what about your experience?
So it really depends on whether it's a student who's in a mixed class or if it's a class that's entirely dual enrolled students. So when I have taught classes that are entirely dual enrolled students, I do think I moderate a bit of what I'm doing to fit the population a little bit better. In part because when that happens, you get some younger students too who are not just 17, not just 16, but sometimes 15 as well. And the content needs to be modified just a smidge to get, they're not going to be, voting anytime soon. They feel like it's too far off in the future. So you have to kind of engage them in a slightly different way. And so you try and bring them things that they can be involved with now. And so your content does change from your typical college student. In the mixed classes, though, I definitely agree that they tend to kind of fall into the pattern of other students. Um, and a lot of times, like, there's no marker. When I get a course roster, there's no marker of whether they're an early college student or not. I can go look it up, but I tend not to notice until they tell me. And they just tend to be, as Ryan mentioned, very good students because they are the students who are achieving a little bit higher. And so they do want to dual enroll or go to early college. Um, and so they're usually doing fairly well. And it isn't until, we start talking about voting, frankly, that I hear like, oh, I'm not old enough yet to vote. And so we have that conversation. But they are very engaged in it. You just sometimes have knowledge gaps. And not so much knowledge gaps about curriculum, but sometimes just remembering like recent history. And that can sometimes, if you're doing an activity where it's like, remember, this thing 5 or 10 years ago, they don't remember that thing 5 or 10 years ago. And so, it's a much younger subset of students than you're typically used to having in your classroom.
So I wonder if we could drill down a little bit on specific civic engagement activities, experiences that just giving the audience an introduction to what you tend to do in your classrooms, in the classroom context where there are high school or dual enrolled students, just to give an idea of the scope of what we're talking about in terms of their engagement in the class. So Kim, would you mind starting us off with that kind of overview?
So I will say that the thing that dual enrollment and early college and those types of students do the best with are simulations. Because it's kind of all contained. It's all self-contained. They don't have to have any kind of life experience to participate in it. They just have to have what's given to them in the assignment. So in my intro classes, we do a congressional simulation, which usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. And they are very much on top of it for the whole thing. And they're used to that kind of activity in the classroom still. And so it's very easy for them to kind of get into it and get motivated. So simulations tend to be the thing that they do the best with at that age. When we start having to, when I start sending them to local government meetings, sometimes there's a bit of nervousness on behalf of the students. They don't feel like they're welcome there, or they feel like they're too young to do something. And so sometimes it's not everyone, but sometimes I have to do, some pep talks, give them like some ways to ease into that. So I end up doing a lot more kind of scaffolding into activities that require them to do things outside of the classroom because it's sometimes a little bit nerve-wracking. We have monthly coffee and conversation events on campus, which are often one of the ways in which I try and get them involved in just, civic discourse. And sometimes even that is nerve-wracking. So I'll often have a student who's more advanced come into the classroom so that they have a point of reference when they come to those events, someone who normally comes to those events. So that tends to help those students a lot more than it does some of the traditional college students.
Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, for in the classroom, I always try to find things that relate to what they're going through, right? So the one things that I've had really a lot of luck with the last few semesters is like, when we do like Supreme Court cases or civil liberties, the Bremerton, Washington case, which I'm sure as political scientists, everybody's like, oh yeah, that case, right? You know that case. So, but the idea of like a high school football coach and being at a high school game and like watching people pray on the field, and they understand that they'll bring up, I'll have people that students just talk about really like deep empathetic feelings about how they feel about how this issue, or there's the groups like that, they surprised me with telling me things like prayer at the pole. There's these prayer at the pole organizations that they get emails from their high school about that there's going to be a prayer at the pole. Is that violation of, the First Amendment, and how does that apply? So trying to find things, right, that just connect to their day-to-day lives in the classroom, so they can see how these things really do impact them. That I've had a lot of success with that. And then outside of the classroom, there are so many people that want to partner with students. So like what I've done is try to find those groups outside the classroom that are looking for students to partner with them. And the kind of nice thing is our early college Macomb program has an internship requirement. So when I actually go and meet all the incoming early college students, I tell them, hey, you got an internship coming up. Here's 5 organizations, right, that might be interested in you. And when you take my class on the first day, like we'll talk a little bit about opportunities outside the classroom. So, the county clerks are always looking for people around election time, or, the local government office is looking for X, Y, and Z people to help with what's going on. I can't tell you how many times I'm contacted by a civic organization, a community building organization that's looking for students to help, right? So there's all these partnerships, I think, is the way that I want to say it, because like Kim said, like we are busy, like especially, and me as a community college professor, I'm teaching 6 7 classes, right? So for me it's like I can't teach 150 students how to individually do civic engagement, but there's people out there that can and do it every day, right? So me building the partnerships with those other groups, and then getting the students involved, and then the students creating, on campus, they've created, student organizations that partner them with these institutions or these outside groups too. So it's like students they have a student organization night. They bring in people from the community. They teach them, then the students are teaching the other students, right? So it's like this whole kind of networking organization that's just been, kind of organically created by getting all these people involved. And that's how I think we've had a lot of success with it. Is the outside the classroom stuff is just there's so many people out there that want to partner with students and especially high school students, because that creates also a bridge between what we did around the election this time is we had students that an outside organization that was doing student registration and civic engagement education in the high schools. So we had students from Macomb working with that group, then going back to their high school institutions, taking the stuff they learned from Macomb, right? Learned from the student group, going back to their high school institutions, then coming back, teaching the other students that, and then again, coming full circle. So again, kind of rambling here a little bit, but it's the partnerships, I think, is the big thing. That there's so many people out there that want to help you. You just have to go out there and find them. I spent more time networking with those people and getting them to come to, student the student like Kim was talking about the coffee hour. We have like a student organization night every month, and it's different student organizations, but our civic engagement alliance, which we called it, brought in all these groups every month, talked about these things before the election, then partnered with them in different ways. And yeah, so that we found a lot of success that semester, this semester, especially around the election, with those type of groups that want to work with students.
I mean, to be honest, right? So Kim is talking about scaffolding, and you're talking, Ryan, about partnerships, and those are just two strategies for engaging students, period, right? So this is a panel we're talking about high school students, but we're talking about, oh, simulations and things that relate to the students, et cetera. I'm thinking about how in my class with freshmen, my freshman experience class, we were talking about the San Antonio school walkouts and how that related to early lawsuits about the constitutional right to education. And that was relevant to my students in that context because they went to those schools in San Antonio as high school students, and so they could relate to it in some way. And so I wonder, this is a panel specifically about high school student engagement, but it seems like a lot of what y'all are saying is that we should just treat this as a population who is different than other groups, but a population who we can use many similar pedagogical strategies to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as Ryan was saying, finding the issues that they are concerned about early is important. And then you're able to tie later things in the semester back to those. That has often helped me as well, is kind of finding that focus early and then, saying this is, doing that kind of comparison work. It, we find that they are high interest students, which is good. So they are different in that regard too. But the strategies don't change, really.
So, on your kind of discussion on different structures, there are some elements that are main differences, in terms of age, in terms of ability to have transportation, and to those types of things that could differ for high school and college students. I think to when I was teaching a summer course that had high school students in it, and age ended up being a big situation because they were going off campus and needed parental permission and these types of things. And that's fairly trivial in this case to get worked out. But it's another thing that needed to be addressed and planned for. And so I wonder, if you could talk about the support that exists at your institutions for working with high school students and for working with civic engagement experiences, and whether those two kind of talk to each other, how you utilize those resources, from the high school student support side, if they're thinking about civic engagement experiences, from the civic engagement support side, if they're thinking about the role of high school students, and how you kind of plug in or don't with those groups on campus. Ryan, do you want to start us off with this?
Yeah, I would say speaking to people like us, right, that are faculty that are watching this, I've never talked to anybody when I asked them about getting my students involved in something civically that said no at any institution anywhere. So like just go talk to people. put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm from the community college, or I'm from, X university, and calling a high school, or calling, your county clerk or whoever it is, and I have high school students, or I want to partner with you to do X, Y, or Z. Every single time they've said yes. Every time I've asked them to come and do something, they've said yes. So just really reaching out. I think networking, building those relationships is really important. Just me, for instance, building a relationship. Like I said, when I started, to Kim's point, I was actually an adjunct at Macomb far before I was a full-time professor here. And that's when I noticed I had all those high school students in my class, and I'm like, where are you coming from? Like, I need to know who you are and like how this program works. I knew nothing about it. And so I just did the research on my own, found the program director, sent her an email, met her for lunch, and was like, I just want to be involved with your program. She invited me to speak to all the early incoming college students. So now every year, for the past few years, I am the first professor they see from Macomb Community College, all the early college students from Macomb. So that's a huge opportunity for me too, right? Because then I can plug like, hey, civic engagement, hey, come do work with us, right? So building those relationships is really important. We're super lucky. I don't know how everybody's institution is going to work, but I'd say do some research and find out. But we have so much support for the students. They all have their high school counselors that work with they call them instructors, but they're basically like instructors slash counselors as early college students. They have a seminar that they go to every week, which is like a first year, college experience kind of course for these early college students, but they have it the whole semester, every semester actually. They do it the entire time they're in the program, and they help them with like study skills. They check on how their internships are going. So I built relationships with those people too. That's how I've identified a few people that have been our democracy fellows, who've been amazing. I mean, these people have been just past semester, one of them was invited to the White House for the college, for doing exactly what we're talking about, getting students involved in community college engagement around voting. So it's just really building the relationships, networking, I think is a huge part of it. And again, it's just luck for me that we have just really great institutional support. But you just have to put yourself out there and find the people that are willing to help you do the things that you want to do, I think is what it is.
So I will say that if you're asking about the civic engagement support, you're kind of looking at a good chunk of it right here. And I have another colleague who does a big portion of it as well. And so there's no separate office that really takes care of that. At this juncture, we're hoping to establish one, or reestablish, I should say. As far as the kind of interaction with the high schools, there is an office called K-12 that deals with kind of all of the intersections of these various programs. And they're very helpful in kind of the meta sense of working with like if you're working with a district, right? And there's a problem with the district, or there's an issue you want to address, or you want to start a new program within a district, or within various districts. That said, when it comes to individual students, you're usually left using the tools that you have for other students as well, which is fine because they are students at the college and they are entitled to all those tools as well. Um, it has happened before where a student in an early college situation or a dual enrollment situation has become overwhelmed, right? It's too much, or they're given a little more freedom than they're used to, and so that lack of structure they're not ready for it yet. And I think one thing that it's probably not just an us problem, but probably anyone that has dual enrollment students has to think about is how do we better have a better early alert system for these students, because they are a little more vulnerable to this. They're going from a highly structured environment to one that is very much dependent on their own self-structuring of their work. And so, and their time. So I do think that there's probably more to be done there. And part of that is getting them involved with things on campus so that they are more integrated into the campus culture, because when that happens, they're more likely to attend class and vice versa. So, um, there's a lot to be said about that, I think, and a lot that could be done on top of what's already done, and more than just your typical student, right? Because it's even more than just an incoming freshman, because they're not transitioning fully. They're kind of doing this half step in. And so they've got feet in both worlds.
Kim, on that point, I wonder, is there collaboration among faculty that have or teach predominantly dual enrolled or high school students? Not necessarily replacing this early alert system, but to try to think of a more cohesive way to approach working with those students or identifying issues or challenges with that group of students on your campus?
There have been in the past, definitely pre-COVID, there was a lot more attention paid to that. I think now, with the early college, there are fewer issues because the early college has better infrastructure than the typical dual enrollment programs. The ones that tend to slip through the cracks a little bit more are the one-off dual enrollment students, because they don't have that same structure put on their experience. And so, you have to make sure as an instructor that you're watching that they're coming to class, that they're doing their work. Um, and so I think we could, as faculty, maybe do a little bit more about that. But there hasn't been anything done since some of the restructuring of how these programs work.
I think for both of y'all, I'm wondering what some advice you would have for instructors that are finding themselves with an increasing number of dual enrolled students. We've talked about, intentionality in some of the programs y'all have discussed, but a lot of these introduction of one-off dual enrolled students is just kind of happening without a large early college program or something being structured. Institutions are looking for partnerships or extra revenue, or students are coming and all of a sudden you've seen these students in your courses. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on advice for an instructor that is approaching and seeing these dual enrolled students for the first time, not in a setting where it's everything is centered around that dual enrolled experience. I guess this is kind of like Ryan's story earlier of showing up and being like, oh, there's some high school students in here, right? So, Ryan, maybe do you want to take this question first?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say have conversations with your students. Like I very intentionally make the first day of class, syllabus day, but then the latter half is like getting to know your students. I have them interview each other, and then they introduce each other. Each interviewee introduces the interviewer to the entire class, and I ask them that question. Like Kim said, sometimes you don't know. Luckily, I do. But the way that I found out that you find if your student's dual enrollment is you have to like mouse over their name and the tooltip pops up. Like you don't, there's no like way to know. It's like hidden. And I'm new at my institution and I'm telling older like faculty that have been there for a long time, like, here's how you figure out if your students are dual enrollment, but ask them, right? Like just literally spend some time and then find out, hey, why are you dual enrollment? Why are you early college? Why are you here? Just spending a little bit of time asking those questions for them. And then my early college and dual enrollment students, what I've been doing is in those early classes is I have them stick around for a little bit, and they are always, I find, so busy. They have I get them all the time coming to me individually. I got an extracurricular activity. I got a sport. I got band. I got exams coming up. The I got to take my SAT and this. So I'm like, hey guys, I know you have a lot of stuff. Whenever you have something, like just email me the day before. I have a very clear system of how I deal with those students differently. So I'm not getting bombarded by emails from all these students too. But it's that type of thing, like identifying them, having conversations with them. It also is really good to the earlier point we were having conversation about students that have issues and identifying them is like you break down a little bit of that with them, and then when you tell like when I have had students that have had issues before, again, we're lucky at our institution that we have a lot of support for students that are in these type of things. At a 2-year institution, it's pretty rare, I feel like, to have we don't have staff like counselors for that, but we have a program that has people that are involved in that, and then they have outside counselors that they bring in. But I've had to refer a few students to that program, but then everybody's notified, right? Like their counselor's notified, their then by relationship, their parent is notified. So it's like having everybody on the institution on the same page when issues like that arise is really important too. And like just getting to know your student a little bit early on, I think breaks down some of that like apprehension that when the student's like showing up and has their head down a lot of the day, and like you approach them and be like, hey, are you okay? Are things okay? We have resources that if you need something, that I think just gives them the opportunity that I've had kind of the opportunity to break down some of those maybe barriers a little bit more. And I know that's kind of we're trailing off a little bit here, but I think it's important. It's another part of our jobs, I think, in some ways. So
Kim, what do you think about advice for the first time teacher of dual enrolled students?
So, I do also encourage gathering a lot of information early on. I survey all my students first week of class. And I've refined that over many semesters, but one of the things that I ask in addition to kind of some of the standard questions is whether there's anything that they think will affect their learning, or get in the way of them doing the work of the class. And students will be pretty honest about that, most of the time, and say, like, I'm doing this other thing, I have this responsibility, that responsibility. And so I think that having that information early on, looking through it, just kind of being aware is a good first step. But then also encouraging your students to kind of just chat with you, as things come up. They're used to a very different style of interaction with teachers. And so getting them used to, a relationship between a college professor and a student is also part of the job. Um, I would encourage institutions to, and if the institutions don't do it, then department chairs should think about having some sort of like, just brief document, or if it's not a document, then maybe information that's passed down about like, here's what we typically find of our population of dual enrolled students. Here's some things to look out for. Um, Maybe there's certain dates to look out for, like this is typically when this thing happens or that thing happens. So don't schedule a major project around that time or you're going to have trouble. Because we don't plan in the mindset of high school students, right? And that often leads to conflicts, especially in the semester, whether it's you call it your winter semester or spring semester. There's all kinds of like weird pitfalls that can happen, whether it's spring break or prom or whatever is always creeping up during the semester. So it could be very simple stuff like that. It can be bigger, like here's who you contact when there's specific kinds of issues. But getting a lot of information from your students and setting up that clear line of communication from the beginning, I think is really important.
yeah, I have to add the spring breaks never align.
No.
They're always different.
Well, but that raises or brings us back to the point from earlier about thinking more broadly about these students as another group of students, in that we're thinking all the time about spring break times for our students that are parents, and we're thinking about spring break times for faculty that are parents. And being in Texas, there are 5 billion independent school districts near here that none of them align, right? So that kind of again is okay, this is an important consideration for this population of students, but it's also an important consideration for a lot of other groups of students and staff and faculty on campus. And I think, just to kind of wrap up this conversation, that seemed to be the main theme, which was that we should be intentional about how we engage with dual enrolled high school students, et cetera. And we should think about their needs and them as a population. We should get to know them individually and have conversations, and that will help us better structure civic engagement experiences, et cetera. And we should do that anyway, in terms of our regular courses and how we're thinking about them. And then, so this situation where you're getting a different population in class is just another opportunity to think about doing that in another way. And I think that, is some good advice for faculty that are concerned and thinking about, well, maybe I have to change all the ways I'm doing things in the classroom when I see that this population is now emerging in my classes. So I kind of want to wrap up here and thank both of y'all for your willingness to come on and talk about your experiences with dual enrolled high school students. There's going to be another panel that's going to follow this one where we're going to expand this discussion and think a little bit about the future of the college classroom as more high school students come in with college credit and more of those students might not be taking our introductory courses in American government, et cetera, in college anymore. And so I'd encourage all the participants and the listeners to make an effort to look out for that future panel. But for now, I want to thank our panelists so much for coming on and sharing their expertise. So thanks so much.
Thank you.